And so we're going to look at a gospel story together today. It's a quite familiar one. Are we ready? Are we ready? There we go. Amen. So our gospel reading, as I said, comes from Matthew. Now, Matthew is one of the 12 apostles, in case you're unfamiliar. One of the 12 apostles in this inner group with Jesus. So he walks and talks with Jesus. He sees many things, more so, of course, than the average person in the life and ministry of Jesus. He sees miracles and teachings and healings and all sorts of things. Matthew is present for them. Now, Matthew himself was a tax collector. And if you can remember from our sermon this summer on Zacchaeus, tax collectors were not well liked. The Jewish people did not like the tax collectors because they sort of betrayed their own people, the Jews, and kind of colluded with, worked with the Romans, this foreign occupying power, to collect taxes from the people at great expense, and it would profit the tax collector. We talked about this, and this is Matthew. Now, one thing I love about Jesus and his ministry is that Jesus would call Matthew the tax collector and also would call someone named Simon the Zealot. And if you want to understand, Simon the Zealot is this Sicarii movement of the first century. They would have been trained to kill tax collectors. Now, he wasn't just angry with them. They would have been trained to kill tax collectors. This was the zealot movement. And Jesus calls the tax collector and the zealot both to give up their former lives and way of thinking and to conform to the way of Jesus and to his kingdom. So all people are invited into this kingdom. Jesus models this very well. Now, Matthew, of course, changes his heart, works towards a loving relationship with Jesus, being one of these 12 disciples who's called by Jesus and would eventually write the Gospel of Matthew. Now, the Gospel of Matthew, you may say, is the most Jewish of the four Gospels. Right? There's the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each of them tell the same story of Jesus, but from different lenses and different perspectives, and they emphasize different things. And as the authors sit down to write, they are thinking in their minds of who the audience is they're specifically writing to. And for Matthew, it would have been specifically to the Jews. And so he explains things in different ways, and he doesn't explain things in certain ways, knowing that the Jews would have been familiar. For instance, the Gospel of Mark would have been more written towards the Gentiles, the Greeks. So this is what we know about the Gospel of Matthew, and we're going to be looking in Matthew for this month. So our Gospel story comes from Matthew 14, but I want us to build up to that context, if we could, to set the stage for where we're going and what's happening. So in Matthew's chapter 12, 13, and the beginning of 14, there are a lot of red letters. Now, red letters, if you're familiar, this means the words of Jesus. So there's a lot of Jesus's teachings going on in Matthew chapter 12 and 13. Primarily, he's telling parables, these stories, these mysterious stories that he would present to the crowd, and they would kind of be left wondering, what exactly is the point? What am I supposed to take from this? And there are different things to be taken from stories like the parables. Ultimately, it invites people into the story that they would consider, what would I do in a similar situation? Sometimes in these chapters, Jesus would pull the disciples aside and then explain the parables, because the disciples were a lot like you and I, and they were left with their hands raised, "What, Jesus, hold on, what was that one about? Can you help explain this?" There's a lot of this teaching in Matthew 12 and 13, while Jesus is north in Galilee, where he has his ministry. Then Jesus would travel home, where he grows up. This is Nazareth. We've talked about this before. And there's a quite famous story of Jesus as he returns to Nazareth and he gets up to preach at the synagogue, and the people reject him. The same ones that saw him grow up from a young child, they reject him because of some of the challenging things Jesus would say. He would include some of the foreigners and some of the Gentiles in this blessing of God, and people didn't like that. And so it says they drive him to the edge of a cliff and want to throw him off a cliff, but he escapes from their midst. Jesus was not welcome in his hometown. Now, this story gets much more detail in the Gospel of Luke, but we're told it in the Gospel of Matthew as well. So Jesus returns back to Capernaum from Nazareth, and here, the moment just before our reading today, Jesus would receive some terrible, terrible news. Jesus had a close friend. He had a cousin, and this was a man named John the Baptist. John the Baptist, his mother Elizabeth, and Jesus' mother Mary were cousins, and so this is family. Jesus grows up with John the Baptist. John the Baptist you might call the final Old Testament prophet. Now you're going to go, hold on, he's in the New Testament. Yes, you are correct, but he's this final prophet prophesying the coming of the Messiah. The Messiah is coming, but unlike Isaiah, who would say 700 years before, John the Baptist is saying it just before. He's only a few months older than Jesus, and he would get up as a fiery preacher and preach that the Messiah is coming for us to repent, to rethink in light of the kingdom that comes. John the Baptist would go into the wilderness, the Judean wilderness, and would preach and would baptize people in the Jordan River, baptizing even Jesus, and he caused quite a stir. In fact, this fiery preacher, John the Baptist, would eventually say the wrong thing to the wrong person and would get thrown into prison. And I'm not going to go into the whole story with John the Baptist, but he says the wrong thing. He's thrown into prison. A series of events happens at a birthday celebration, and King Herod orders that John the Baptist be removed from the jail cell and executed. John the Baptist is killed, beheaded. John's disciples would then inform Jesus' disciples, and then they tell Jesus, Jesus, your friend, your cousin, your fellow worker in the ministry has been killed. Jesus receives this message just before our reading today. And so we look at a familiar story, but within the context of what's going on. Matthew chapter 14, if you want to read along, it'll be on the screen, verses 13 down to verse 21. Now when Jesus heard this news, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. And he went ashore and saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. The story of the feeding of the 5,000. This is a quite familiar story. Maybe you've spent time in the scriptures or time in church and you've heard this story before. It's a wonderful miracle. It's a miraculous sign that Jesus does. He takes these fish and these loaves and he multiplies them to feed, it says 5,000. And that's always what we hear, the 5,000. And yet it's 5,000 men plus the women and the children. And so even if conservative estimates would get us easily to 10 or 15 or even 20,000 people that are present, Jesus does a miraculous thing as he multiplies the fish and the loaves. And as we consider this miracle of Jesus, this divine work that only he could do, I want us, in fact, to look closely into the story. And I believe there are some important lessons that we ought to take away from this, perhaps in a way that we maybe have not thought about the story before. So I pray today, even though you heard this story, and maybe it's familiar, that you would say, "Lord, give me something afresh. Give me something new that I might pull away from this story to learn." So I've got 3 things for us today. 3 things for us to understand. The first, number 1, be alone, but don't stay alone. Be alone, but don't stay alone. Now, some of you are wondering, will these be on the screen? And the answer to that is no. And the primary reason is because I was still working on how I wanted to phrase them. And so I didn't commit to the screens. Number 1, if you want to write these down, feel free. Be alone, but don't stay alone. Jesus received some terrible news. The death of a loved one, the death of a friend, the death of a co-laborer in ministry, the death of someone whom he loved. He received this devastating news, and how did Jesus respond? Jesus, fully God and yet fully human at the same time, responded in a very human way that you and I are likely to relate to. It says that Jesus pulled away to be by himself. He got into the boat. He left the crowd, he left the disciples, and he floated away to a desolate place. There are different towns alongside the Sea of Galilee, and he went to an area kind of between where towns would have been, where not a lot is going on, a little more wilderness. And he's there on the boat, on the shore, by himself. And we're not told what he's doing, but of course we can imagine that he's doing what any of us would do. He's thinking, he's processing, he's praying. Perhaps he's crying, he's weeping over the loss of his friend. The same thing that any of us would do. He pulls away to be by himself, as he should. It is a very human thing to do. Now, the truth is, for us, we will all have things that happen to us in our life that are not so good. Difficult things, struggles, bad things. And the truth is, as I leaned into this a little bit more, for us, we're tempted when those things happen to pull away and to be by ourselves as we, again, process and think, pray, maybe cry, to deal with these things. At the same time of these bad things, also we have a tendency to do this as people, even with just big things in life that aren't even necessarily bad things. And as I began to think through my relationships with people and the things I've seen throughout ministry of many years, this tends to happen repeatedly again and again. For instance, let's start with the one that Jesus is dealing with, the death of a loved one. Someone might experience the loss of a parent or a child or a spouse or of a mother or father for someone in their life, and they pull away to be by themselves. It's, of course, very normal and very human thing to do. It's having a baby or perhaps struggling to have a baby, a good thing or a struggle, a bad thing. I know friends, and I've had them, maybe you have too, I think some people in particular, they have their baby and then they kind of pull away from what's normal, their community, their friends, maybe their church, their people. They pull away to kind of get by themselves and to think, okay, we need to control the environment as best as we can, and so we're going to kind of be alone. It's not because there was a bad thing, it's just because there was a big life event. Moving to a new place. Moving to a new place can be scary. And here we live in Castle Rock, a beautiful place that anyone would want to live. And so as people move here from other places, there is a temptation to move into the neighborhood, and then you pull into the driveway, you close the garage door behind you, and you stay there in your home alone, not getting out to meet and connect with people. And this season of, hey, I'm new here, becomes a lifestyle, becomes a life where we live by ourselves if we're not careful. I've seen it. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you've experienced it. Losing a job, getting a promotion, getting busy with things that are going on at work, like all these things, these big things can, if we're not careful, cause us to pull away to be by ourselves. Now it is okay, let's be clear again, to pull away to be by yourself, to think, to process, to consider next steps, to pray. That's okay. The challenge comes, of course, is that when we get alone, we can be tempted to stay alone. And for people to think, okay, this is just going to be a season where I pull away to be by myself, or this is just going to be a season where I pull away to mourn or weep. It's just going to be this small moment turns into multiple seasons, multiple months, multiple years, and before they know it, a lifetime has gone by, and they never left the comfort of just their own little bubble, and they stayed alone and isolated. And the truth that we need to understand today is that that is exactly where the enemy, where the Satan would want us to be, is alone. The enemy would like for us to be alone, believing that you are a burden on someone else. Or believing perhaps that you don't need anyone. If you've ever felt, oh, I'm just a burden on other people. Or, hey, I don't need anyone. That is, in fact, a dangerous place to be once you've pulled away and are by yourself alone, isolated. You know, I've done in my life many, many dumb things. I've had many sins and many struggles, and I've shared many of them here before. There's been one thing that I want to lean into that I believe has been a blessing in my life, and it's not just for me, it's me and Jesslyn together, something that has been very helpful to us, and it is the truth that we are quick to lean into the community that's around us, the people that are around us, the church family perhaps that's around us. We've been through some big things in our life. The first year after our marriage, instead of having a little anniversary trip, which we had planned, we moved. And that wasn't on the agenda, but we moved, and I moved from South Carolina all the way to New Orleans, Louisiana to attend school, and we didn't really know anyone there, and it could be easy to get to a new place and for it to just be like, okay, it's just going to be us two. It's just us in the world, and we don't know anyone, and we're not going to have any friends. It can be a temptation to just stay there, but we knew we needed to find a church. We had grown up in church, but to be honest, our parents and others, always like pressures or like influences to get us to church. Here we are in New Orleans. No one's telling us we have to go to church. No one's telling us we can't stay up late on a Saturday and sleep in late on a Sunday. But we know we need to lean in to find some people to be with us. Now, the funny thing is, the church that we found that we got connected with actually was not that great of a church. Maybe you found a church that's not so great before. We've experienced them. We go there. Let me be clear. We go there. It's a beautiful building. There's these wooden floors, these great windows. There's this woman that's leading worship, and she does beautifully, plays the piano and sings, and we're like, oh, man, this is amazing. And Justin's singing, this girl is awesome. And we go there's the first Sunday, and we say, this will be our church. And that was the first and last time we saw that girl lead worship. She was kind of filling in for the regular guy, and he was back the next week. And he was fine, but he wasn't her. The pastor's sermons were okay. I would kind of raise my hand in the sermon and go, hold on, explain that more. There was things wrong with the church, but this is not the point. The point is that we needed to find our people. It wasn't about the excellence of the church. It wasn't about the perfect production of the church or the perfect things that are going on. We needed to be connected to people that knew us, that knew our names, and we knew their names, and they could call us and connect with us because we were new in an area, and it can be a temptation to stay alone. We needed to be with other people. You know, I've shared this before. Justin's dad, of course, his name was Bruce, so we named our Bruce after. He passed away from cancer in 2014. And the Sunday after the funeral, Jesslyn was up there at the church singing and leading in worship. Now, she wasn't forced to be. No one told her she had to be. She had all the time away that she wanted to do. But Jesslyn in her heart wanted to be there to sing and to lead and to be a part of the worship and to lead it. And I remember it being a very emotional service with many tears that were shed. But she was right where she wanted to be with her people. She had her moment alone. She had her time to weep and cry. She said, I want to be with those who love me and those who care for me. That was a big thing. That was a big deal. We've had kids. We've had miscarriages where people have been close to us, as I've shared. I believe it was Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Bruce, our second child. We were at the hospital on that evening. I don't remember what night it was. And at the same night, typically, we would host small group at our house. So it was at our home, and we'd share a meal, and we led the group. And so it's that night, and rather we're going like, hey, we're kind of busy. We're at the hospital having a baby. And the group said, what should we do? And we're like, well, you can't really come here yet. But why don't y'all just have group at our house? So we unlocked the door, and they came to our home, and someone cooked a meal, and someone led the group. And group was going on in our home while we were at the hospital having a baby. And guess where we were the next week? We were at home, and the group came over, and we had small group. Now, some of you are hearing this and going, y'all are a little crazy. It's a little extreme. And perhaps, but I have found so many times the truth is that it is better to lean back into people, back into the community, back into those who love you and care for you and want the best for you. When you go through difficult moments or big life moments where you're pulled away to be by yourself, it's good to lean back in. We were right where we wanted to be, not because we were forced to be. We wanted to be in these places. See, when Jesus pulls away to be alone, he sees the crowd that follows him along, and he has compassion on them, and then he goes to be with them. He doesn't stay alone. He could have just stayed in the boat, stayed by himself. So the truth is that we need to learn from Jesus in the beginning of this story. It is okay to be alone, but don't stay there. Don't stay alone. Lean back in. Be alone, but don't stay alone. Number 2, how are we doing? Number 2, your pain can become your ministry. Your pain can become your ministry. Now, the first point, number 1, has to do with us, ourselves, and how we process and deal with something and then lean back into the community because it's something that we need. It's important for us. You start with yourself and then you work your way outward to others. This point is less to do with ourselves and more to do with those whom we will come into contact with in our lives. Our neighbors and coworkers and friends and family, those that we interact with, this is more about them. The truth is our pain can become our ministry. Jesus had pulled away. He was by himself. He was crying. He was upset. He was saddened. He was perhaps angry. He was processing what was going on. His friend and cousin had just been killed. And then he sees the crowds. And rather than being annoyed, I'm thinking, what would I be like? What would I do there? I would be annoyed probably at the crowd. And Lord, forgive me and align my heart more with yours. Jesus instead had compassion. He had compassion on this crowd, and he went to them and he healed them. He healed their sick, and he would teach them and be with them. And here's what I'm thinking is going on in this moment. Jesus, as he sees the crowd and he's thinking about himself and this pain that he has just experienced, and he's looking out at them and he's going, I wonder how many of them have also lost a loved one. I wonder how many of them are sick and hurting. I wonder how many of them are lost. I wonder how many of them are poor or hungry or hurting or destitute. I wonder how many of them are experiencing pain in the same way that I'm experiencing this pain. And I'm going to use this pain to rather lead me into ministry to care for those who are in a similar place. You see, all of us have a story in our lives of sin and shame and pain. Jesus in this story, as we know, does not sin. This is not about the sin of Jesus. He experienced a pain, however. For us, it can be pains that we experience. It can also be sin and shame and struggles that we have of our own accord, of our own poor decisions. These things happen in our lives, and yet for many of us, we have a story of redemption where God has come in to rescue us, to pull us out from one place, to lead us to the next, and praise God for that. The truth is that I've seen so many times is we have these moments of pain and sin and struggle, and we would like to just keep them hidden under the rug. We want to keep them where no one really knows about them, where it's not talked about, where we don't have to relive it, where we don't have to talk about it, where we don't have to be present with it. Most people simply leave it there. And the truth is, it's our pain, it's our shame at times, it's our sin, our struggles that can lead us into ministry. You know, as I've shared before, we along the way had 4 miscarriages mixed in with our 4 children. And each time was devastating. Each time was a punch in the gut. Each time was a why, God, why is this happening? And yet because of that, I know Jessalyn has been able to meet with so many women over the years that are struggling with miscarriage, struggling with infertility, struggling with some of these things connected to pregnancy, and say, hey, this is a pain, a struggle that I have gone through, and I want to sit and be with you, not because I necessarily have all the answers to your questions. I have some answers, but what I do have is I have presence, and I'm going to sit with you. And I will cry with you, and I will pray with you, and I will be with you. Because people in those scenarios, as we've already said, have a tendency to want to pull away and be alone. So our ministry that comes from our pain can even help reach out and pull those people back in that have a tendency to pull away from the community. They need people to come after them. As the shepherd might go after a sheep, they need people to go after them. As I've shared before, I grew up in church and grew up a Christian, and I grew up very judgmental. I was judgmental. I was. I built these walls up, and I would look to who's outside of the wall, those that are not Christians or not following Jesus, or they claim to be, but then they lived another way. And I was so quick to judge them and be harsh with them and critique them and cast them away. That was a big part of who I was. And it took God leading me down a dark path to rescue me out of that way of thinking, that I might then love and care for those people better, and to save me from this judgmental spirit. Now the truth is, in my life, if you know me at all, my ministry, what I love to do is spend time with those very same people that I've once been so critical of. I love to sit together with those who don't follow Jesus, who don't go to church, who don't claim to be Christians. I love to sit with them and hear their story and hear what's going on and hear perhaps some experiences and listen and care and love and show compassion. It's what I love to do, and it was God rescuing me, and He's using this sin and shame that I have of being judgmental and now using it to care for those that are outside where I've once left them. I think for you, for each of us, we have these things that go on in our lives. These sins or struggles. Maybe you're a man in here and you've struggled in your past with lust or pornography. Something that everyone would want to just tuck away and hide and let no one really know about and put it under the rug. And yet perhaps God has rescued you from that, and you now need to connect with other men who are walking through a similar place that you once were. Be bold enough to use your pain, your shame, your sin to then connect with people who are still walking in that now. To be a listening ear. Again, maybe you don't have all the advice to give, but you can give a phone call. You can check in on them. You can be accountability. We can use these things in our lives. Our pain can become our ministry. Maybe you have some sort of addiction. Drugs and alcohol, substance abuse. And the Lord has rescued you from that. And what a tremendous story. I have so many friends, and that's their story. And praise God that He would save these people out of this addiction and set them free into a new life. And the beautiful stories that I see are not the ones who have left it there hidden, but the ones that go now to the places and care for and minister to and serve the very ones who are still stuck in the same addictions that they once were. The book of Revelation, it says this in chapter 12, verse 11. I don't have this on the screen, but it says, they defeated the evil one, the Satan, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They defeated the evil one by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. You see, the truth is, Jesus is going to win. Jesus is going to defeat the evil, the sin. Jesus is going to be the only one who can save. You can't save your friends. You can't save your family members. You can't save the person stuck in the addiction that you once had. You cannot do it. But Jesus, the blood of the Lamb, He can save. But the beautiful thing is there's power in our story, in our testimony. It says it's overcome by the blood of the Lamb, Jesus, and the word of their testimony. What's your testimony? It's your story. It's the story of the sin and shame you were stuck in that God said, no, I'm saving you out of that. And it's not just for you. It's for those that you now come into contact with. It's for your neighbor down the street. It's for your family member. It's for your brother or sister. It's for the people you work with, those that might be stuck in these same places, to use your story, because there is power in your story that can break the chains of bondage that people are tied up in. Your pain can become your ministry. Now, I'll leave this with a caution. Just like the first point, number one, it's okay to be alone. Get alone first. And then come back together with the people. Don't stay alone. In the same way here, get out of your pain. Work through your misery. Work through your shame. Be saved from this. Have accountability in your own life. And then go back in to serve and to care and to minister to those ones that you need. Those that God leads you to. Your pain can become your ministry. Number 3, last one. Are we ready? I love this point. Number 3, you feed them. You feed them. You feed them. There's a crowd that's gathered. It gets late. It's dark. The disciples come to Jesus and say, hey, it's getting late. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's a desolate place. Why don't we send the crowds on home into the towns to get some food? And Jesus says the most peculiar thing to them. He says, no, they don't need to go anywhere. You feed them. You give them something to eat, is what Jesus says. You feed them. He says this to his disciples. And I believe that the truth is very deeply embedded in this that is still true for us today as disciples of Jesus, of whom we want to be as the church, followers of Jesus. And there are people in this world, people in our communities, people that we know, and we look to Jesus and he tells us the same thing he told his disciples there on the hillside. He says, you feed them. What is Jesus telling his church? Feed them, serve them, provide for them, care for them, lift them up. There are so many people around us struggling in different ways. Maybe they're poor and hungry. They need assistance. They need a lift up. Are we willing to reach down to help care and lift people up? Because Jesus is still telling us, you feed them. You provide. You care. As a church, I want us to be a group of people that cares for those that we see, those that we walk by, those that maybe find us online. As a church, we're able to help people all the time. And I know more of the stories than you know, and I need to get better at sharing those with you. But every week, every month, there are multiple people that come to us with a certain need for groceries or a car payment or a rent payment or something that they need to get by in this life. And we're able to give this money away. We give a lot of money away as a church. And it's because I want us to be like Jesus, who modeled this and who I believe is telling me and telling us, you feed them. The question is who fed the crowd? Right? Who fed the crowd? Jesus, of course, is going to be Jesus, and he's going to perform the miracle. But who fed the crowd? It was the disciples that fed the crowd. In the Gospel of John, it gives us a little more detail in the story. It tells us a young boy comes, and he's the one who has the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He has his dinner. And he brings it to the disciples, and they take it to Jesus and say, here's what we have. And Jesus takes it and blesses it, and it multiplies miraculously to feed the whole crowd. So a question I believe we all need to wrestle with is, what are your 5 loaves and your 2 fish? Man, if you've been coming to this church for any time, you know that I don't harp on financial giving very often at all. I really don't. I believe it's something between you and the Lord, and I also believe it is the way that you can receive a blessing from the Lord when you're faithful in your giving to Him. I know it's a touchy subject, but what are your 5 loaves and your 2 fish? What are you bringing to the Lord? What are you giving to Him that He might do with more with it than you could do with it yourself? The truth is, I love about this little boy, he comes and he gives up his dinner. He had this great dinner, 5 loaves and 2 fish. It sounds like a great meal to me. He brings it to Jesus. He brings it to the disciples, and he gives it up, and he sacrifices it of his own volition, of his own accord. He gives it away and says, I'm not going to have my dinner. I'm going to give it to you. And because of his obedience, the whole crowd was fed. And he was fed. And he was fed. You see, when we are obedient in giving unto the Lord, He takes it and He does more with it than we can do with it ourselves. And after He uses it to provide for other people, guess what He's going to do? He's going to come right back and He's going to bless you with it. You get to receive the blessing too. As we follow the Lord in obedience and as we live a generous life with open hands to say, Lord, you take it and you do with it what you can do with it. For all of us, we have to answer the question, what's my 5 loaves and my 2 fish? Because I believe the truth is still the same. Jesus looks at us. He looks at me and He looks at you. And He says, you feed them. I pray we would be challenged by these words. We can't perform the miracle. Jesus is going to do that. We have to trust Jesus to be the miracle worker. The Holy Spirit in us, filling us, allows us to do more than we could ever do by ourselves. But we come in obedience to say, I'm going to open my hands. I'm going to give what I don't necessarily think I even could give and trust the Lord to provide for other people and then believe that He's going to come right back to me and provide for me. And that's not why we give, but it's a blessing promised to us in Scripture. Number 1, be alone, but don't stay alone. Number 2, your pain can become your ministry. And number 3, you feed them.